So now we get into the panel discussion this afternoon. So it's quite obvious that the church has been going through a difficult year, and there's more difficult moments ahead. And we need some radical witnesses to remind us of the faith that we have professed. That yes, it takes guts, but we have been called nonetheless. And I'm happy to say that we do have speakers who are living that radical life to be with us today and to tell us about their story and how they do live that radical life that Christ has called us to be to living. So what I'd like to introduce first off, so I don't get names wrong, is Caitlin Smith and FRITZ SCHLOSS, who are from the L'Arche community. If you could please come up and give them a round of applause, everyone. So at L'Arche, Greater Washington, D.C., core members have transformed our world and worked toward become a more human society. Core members and their assistants will share their experience of making known and celebrating the gifts of people with intellectual disabilities, moving beyond our society's simple acceptance and accommodation of disability. That we value and honor the significant contributions people with disabilities make in our communities and in our church. So we welcome the both of you here to our discussion panel. Next is Ryan Hammond. Ryan, are you here? Welcome. Please come up. Ryan, a round of applause, please. Thank you. Welcome. Ryan Hammond is the Washington, D.C. director of A Simple House of Saints Francis and Alphonsus, a Catholic inner-city mission that serves the poor through friendship evangelization. Ryan has been a missionary with A Simple House since he graduated from the Catholic University in 2016. So welcome back. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Amy Uhlman. Welcome. Amy Uhlman is a lecturer at Georgetown Law School, where her scholarship and teaching focus on the intersection between legal theory, religious values, and professional life. She holds a BA in American Studies, a JD and an SJD research doctorate from Georgetown, and an MA in theology from Fordham. A longtime member of the folklore movement, she currently lives in Silver Spring Community House. Recent books include 5 Steps to Positive Political Dialogue and 5 Steps to Healing Polarization in the Classroom, both published with New York City Press. So thank you for joining us. We give a round of applause for our panelists here.
So we will begin with the panel discussion, and then at the end we have these stations where the microphones are on the sides for you to come up and line up for questions. So please hold all till the end. Thank you.
So to begin, I'm just going to pass the mic around and ask that you introduce yourself while you're here, and we'll go right into the discussion.
So again, I'm Amy, and I think I'm here because I'm a fan of World Youth Day. so I was in Denver in '93 and in Toronto in 2002, and I feel like I'm here. Also, I just want my sister is in a performing arts group that's performing right now in Panama. So with the group Gen Verde, which is also part of the Focolare community, and so I think I'm here really to experience World Youth Day with all of you. That's why.
Well, I'm very happy to be here. I alternatively have never been to a World Youth Day event, so I'm very happy to be at my first one ever. I've been a missionary with A Simple House for 12 years, and very happy to share our experience, both helping the people that we serve in inner city neighborhoods, as well as talking about ways to build and promote a community.
I will come here. My mom. I will look over here. I will give my mom. I will give your son. I will be doing. Harry. I might be give my mom. This is son. I will give be here. I will home. I will father. I may my mom is the son. I will never be here. At home. I will give a goodbye. At church, I will be here. Look, we go home. I will go goodbye. Then I will go away. It's gone. I will remember my mom. This is sad. Adoration. We will be here. I may be my mom. And we will home. And we can come goodbye. My mom. This is Adoration. Carly. Harry. Harvey. My mom. Mom. John. Doreen. And Carly. Harry. Harvey. Mom. And Dolly. We go get a butcher. We'll be at home. Then, let's go. It'll be. He died.
My name is Caitlin, and I'm in the L'Arche community along with Fritz. That was the perfect intro to why I'm here. I think that when Fritz calls you by name, or when you call Fritz by name, there's something about who we're called to be and who we're called to. So, yeah. Sometimes I get the honor of being in that long list of really important people. Not today. But I think I did hear my husband's name a little bit, Luke. Did you talk about Luke? No. Yeah. So. Okay, well, we'll keep going on L'Arche here for a minute. Question for you guys. How many of you have heard about L'Arche communities? Awesome. Wonderful. So I don't really need to fully explain, but I will share that we are one of 18 communities in the United States, and over 150 communities across 35 different countries. We have 2 homes here in the Adams Morgan neighborhood and 2 homes in South Arlington. And we were started in 1964 by a man named Jean Vanier. Everybody knows Jean Vanier, I hope, or maybe Henry Nouwen. He started a small house in the country where he invited 3 men from an institution to live with him. So the thing that I was thinking about of how to build community is to focus on the why today. So why would Jean Vanier invite men to live with him in a home? And why did those men, who would become, 2 would become the founding core members, why would they say yes to that? Most definitely those invitations are something that we experience sometimes very gently at L'Arche, and other times much more dramatically, whether that's the question or the response to the question. And I think for me personally, when I joined L'Arche about 10 years ago, I was asking questions about who am I called to be? And then I realized after a couple of years in L'Arche, I was also answering the question, to whom am I called? I got a lot of help with grammar before that. To whom am I called? Right, to the people who I'm called to. And I had discerned a lot of markers in my life, right? I was a retreat leader, I was a successful student, I was a decent big sister. And I came to L'Arche, and all of those markers didn't really matter anymore. And I started to discover who I was in a way that was different. And actually, the thing that has been most meaningful in the past couple of weeks, Fritz already demonstrated for you, the world's a little bit crazy, and where I am in my life also feels a little bit crazy. And so when I go to L'Arche to share dinner at Fritz's house, I really try, and it usually takes the entire hour to just slow down and be there. And I was sitting next to Fritz recently, one of those cold days, and snow days are beloved by some and hated by most parents with children, and mostly hated at L'Arche too, because we get cabin fever real quick. But it was one of those snow days, and it was cold outside, and we're sitting next to Fritz, and he was praying for his mom. And we were talking about the beach, yeah, Ocean City. Yeah. It was just one of those nights where I heard very, very like tangibly faithfulness. You won't meet Fritz without meeting his mom, who is this incredible 93-year-old woman who could sing and dance today. You won't, at Christmas time, you'll hear some little drummer boy from Fritz that brings this joy into the room that you can't make up, right? It's not made up. So I also wanted a chance, so I think what I'm trying to say is who I was really intrinsically tied up in who Fritz is, because he called me to a different me. We recently did this activity in community called Where I'm From Poems. They're beautiful poems written by a woman named George Ella Lyon and allow you to walk through some things of who you are, right? But they don't use the markers that we might use every day. So Fritz wrote one of these poems. Ryan, could you share that mic with Fritz? I'm gonna have Fritz read this poem for you guys, because I think it really is a helpful thing of what I'm talking about, of who we're called to be and who we're called to. So it's...
FRITZ, SCHLOSS. My mom, May. I make it summertime. Dolly, December, on to the hospital. God with the Apple Easter. I was God with my mom again. Shopping, monitor, flower, and the beach. To get better, and a friend. Barbara's rain. Yes. Salala. And no. Ever happen. Money. Work. It's just sleeping. Gonna go away. Falling. You go sleep. And you go tit-tit-tit-toe.
Fritz, what song is that?
Sweet
Sweet Little Boy.
No. Ever happy. Money. Wow.
And last idea for right now is a lot of talent that we're not afraid to share.
Thank you. Thank you, Fritz. That was great. I'm usually so afraid to sing in front of people, so. A simple house, I guess if we're talking about our communities and sort of goals, was founded in 2003 with the idea to help families that were living in project neighborhoods or poor neighborhoods that are mostly subsidized, mainly with friendship and with personal help that sort of meets the family's unique needs, rather than sort of proposing one solution to people. We try to walk with folks, develop authentic relationships with them, and then to sort of meet their needs in an ongoing way sort of throughout their lives. There's no case closed situation. And we hope that from that friendship, as we get to know people and sort of grow with them, to sort of be able to speak authentically to our relationship with God, to be able to evangelize, to be able to like just take one person like a step closer to God from where they are, wherever that may be. Like there's a lot of people out there that are just not ready for prime time, you know? A lot of people that don't even have the necessary skills or talents to like get to the food pantry at 9 a.m. or something. And so we sort of hope that just a very kind of personal and kind love and help can get that person from maybe step 0 to step 1. And in our whole history, kind of the idea of our community the whole community life we've just tried to serve whatever it was that the mission of the organization was, you know? So it was like, well, we want to, and our founder, Clark, when it became clear that there was a group to reach out to, that there was work to do, it was like, well, we need a house. Well, we need more volunteers. And we have to have some principles to live by, you know? Well, so what are the principles? And in 2003, and thanks be to God that it's really not this way anymore, but it was pretty hard to find a lay organization where you could go and live a simple religious life that kind of adhered truly to the teachings of the church and also wanted to evangelize and reach out to the poor. There wasn't a great menu of options for those things at that time. And thanks be to God, today there's a huge landscape of organizations that are doing that. But it just sort of seemed that it was something that we needed to create. And so the volunteer community just sprung up from the call to evangelize. And just here in DC, so we have a house in Southeast DC, and we also have a house in Kansas City, Missouri. And so when we began the community, we even decided, well, we want our volunteers to pray. So we had some like minimum prayer commitments, like, you know, every volunteer is going to pray morning prayer and evening prayer and go to Mass. And, after that, we sort of decided, well, the mornings get pretty busy, so let's pray together, you know. And then, we wanted to be a little bit more monastic, so let's have grand silence until 9 o'clock. And then we spend all day together, working as we go visit people in their homes in these neighborhoods. So let's not have any mandatory fun in the evenings because people won't like that, So the sort of community life piece came from just whatever the work we were doing, and it sort of served what the volunteers' needs. And I like this approach because I think it keeps people happy and keeps them from, burning out or becoming too community weird. But I also think it's pretty fundamental for communities to be oriented outwards, to be fundamentally oriented on something else, and not, because it's easy to sort of get bogged down in your identity, and a lot of discussions about what kind of community are we, and we're having this personality conflict, and what do we want to do for dinner this night, and all those things can be a bit of a distraction, and sometimes focusing outward on the mission and the goals and why you're in the community for the first place, I think for us is very very life-giving and very nourishing, even during kind of the toughest times of the community. My wife and I have lived in the community for 12 years, and we've seen a lot of ups and downs. We've had to ask people to leave, and a lot of things have happened, and we've invited some of the people that we serve into the houses to live with us. And so in all these things, besides focusing on prayer, kind of being oriented towards the other can be very helpful. So that is, in a sense, I guess, our philosophy on community in a nutshell. So.
Thank you, Ryan. I have not yet been to a simple house, but I have been to a large community, and so I came for dinner one night, and I had lost the address, and so I was late, and even just the warmth and the love that I experienced, but exactly what you said of how it helps you slow down and just immerse yourself in the present and who's next to you in the present. I came away from that dinner just so refreshed, but also I felt able really to then focus on the present, living the present in my life. So I'm so grateful to be with all of you. So I'm part of the Focolare, and the community began in under the ashes of World War II in Italy, and a group of young people who had their ideals and their hopes, and everything was crumbling. And they realized in the midst of that disaster, right, that they could start to love, and they could take the gospel in hand and live it moment by moment. And so, just a little bit like what Ryan was saying, what then opened up was a specific kind of mission and focus. And the mission of the Focolare is to work for unity. And so I think one way of understanding is to say where there's a bridge to build is where we belong. And so whether it's building relationships of trust and open communication among different Christian denominations, there's a lot of work in interreligious dialogue. One of our big challenges here is political polarization, and so that's an area that I have also focused on a lot personally in my own teaching and work as a lawyer. But then I think for me, the kind of core primary unity is interior, right? A sense of integrity in my own life, and exactly in all of these pieces, like how do you live the different aspects of your life, whether it's time for prayer, for work, for outreach, for fun, for being together as a community. And then in my house, for example, my Focolare house, we are 5. We're from 5 different countries, so different ways of doing things and seeing things and language. So I think the common experience is in daily life, what does it take to build those kinds of bridges? But I wanted to also highlight, because when I saw the title, How to Build Communities That Change the World, for me the question is, who is the protagonist in building a community that changes the world? And so I think that that sense of kind of discovering that the Holy Spirit is really that protagonist. And so what does it mean to kind of open ourselves to the depth of the life of the Holy Spirit that can come in and do the building? And so when I saw Pope Francis's message, which was so beautiful, about Mary's yes, and what does it mean to open ourselves to that dimension, I have to confess I'm a big fan of Disney movies, and so has anybody seen Moana? Okay, there's so I just wanted to draw an analogy a second to what is this space of openness, of letting the protagonist come in. So I don't know if you remember the opening scene. I'll describe it. So Moana's like a toddler, this tall, right? And she is attracted by pretty shells on the beach, and she's wanting to grab them, right? And all of a sudden she notices this little baby turtle behind her that's having trouble getting to the water. And so this act of letting go of the kind of grasping that we all tend to have, right? And I think for me, especially growing up in a consumeristic society, what does it mean to kind of make that space and let go of the need to grasp, right? In order to turn around and see who needs help. And how that then just opens up this tremendous space inside of you to be able to receive. First of all, paying attention, and I think that's why L'Arche is so powerful, right? Paying attention to each other in our reality, in our needs, in our concrete needs, right? And then this sense of, it's not me who goes out searching for a mission, right? Of what I can do to build the life of the church, to discover who I am, right? It's the mission, like that heart of Tafiti that then puts the world in place. The mission that comes to me. So Moana is not grasping anything. It comes into her hands in that moment. So I think there's something about the yes of Mary that's in that little image. And then also the way that Mary goes through her life when things are not always completely certain. So maybe a second step, just to flag, would be the wedding feast at Cana. She's like, here's what we need to do, Jesus, and he's like, this is not in your job description, and so this sense of also hanging in there, and a little bit what Ryan was saying, even when things are not clear, all the way up to the foot of the cross, right? In that readiness and that sense that the life of the Holy Spirit to renew the church also comes out from that readiness to go there to the hardest places. So to the foot of the cross, and to turn with love to John, right? To building the church together. So those are those are all things I think that run through any Christian community, right? And whether it has this or that name, that the beautiful thing is to be open to God's work, and then really to celebrate God's work in all of the communities that are present. So that's just a start. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ryan, Amy, Fritz, and Caitlin. Can we give them a round of applause for your insights? I would like to invite everyone up, or anyone who has a question up to the sides. There's a microphone on this side as well as on the other side, so please stand up with any questions that you have, and we'll begin our Q&A session of the panel discussion. I actually have a question myself. So I know that Caitlin, you talked about the why and the importance of that, and then Ryan and Amy, you both talked about the importance of the mission in our ministry, like within a community. So I want to know how important do you think reevaluating that why is in a community, like as it grows and begins to change?
So I think that change is something that we experience at L'Arche every single day, and I hope that in our communities, because we're so focused on the people, that change is something that's going to happen. There was an assistant who often supported a core member who just really, she did not like change, said there's only one thing certain, and that's change. So I think we are constantly both reevaluating our days and sitting down together, like we've described at dinner, to say what was good about today, what was hard, how can I grow? So very, very important to L'Arche.
I think it's essential to reevaluate and to always tap into sort of the reason why you are doing something. I think frequently the cause of what people call burnout or dissatisfaction is usually because you're not somehow engaged with why you're doing something, and you sort of begin to feel like you're going through the motions and that you have no love or no joy in what you're doing, or that you're sort of just in a routine. And that's a real killer for like all ministry and family life and all that sort of thing. So re-engaging is really essential, just to ward off unhappiness. But I also think that like in the face of disappointment, it's really central, because I know in our ministry, there's just lots of failure, you know, and there's always people that, you know, go back on drugs, go back to drinking, go back with the abusive boyfriend, have the abortion, don't get the job and quit the job. I mean, there's just like endless disappointments, you know? And not to make it sound really great, but but I mean, life, you know, like life is filled with disappointments, you know, and we're all going to carry our crosses, and we're all going to meet and face this disappointment, and really engaging with like that suffering and really engaging with that disappointment, just like looking it right in the face when it happens, and really uniting yourself, I think, with Jesus in his suffering. Is really essential. So I think if we avoid those things, we do it to our own detriment. And I believe that, too, that communities fall apart when they avoid these sort of tough questions, and when they avoid the sort of disappointments that you have in community life as well, whether it's like a difficult time in the life of a community member, or like lack of direction in the community, or lack of focus, or like not living up to your mission. Any number of those things. And if we retreat from them instead of engaging with them, we set ourselves up for unhappiness and all these sort of things.
I was just remembering my friend Lucia from Costa Rica is here. We lived in the same community house for a number of years, and I remember there was a certain moment where we were sitting around a table trying to figure out how we could put together in our calendar meetings for little kids ages 4 to 8, medium kids ages 8 to 12, a little bit older kids who needed a different kind of space and time. And we were sitting at the table, and we realized we just cannot do it, right? We can't fit it in, it's not working. It used to work, but for some reason it's not working. And I remember the freedom that we experienced when, instead of just trying to kind of constantly bang our head against the wall, we tried to reevaluate. But in the sense of saying, what is God trying to tell us? And with that, we came up with a completely different plan of other friends in the community who could help, other resources things that we were trying to do that we could ask other people to get involved with. And so it like launched this sense of shared responsibility. So what seemed to be a limit, and in some ways a failure, right, became in that very space of kind of vulnerability and letting God enter into that, it became the source of something very new and very important for the sustainability of our work. And so I think those are the kinds of things where, and it's exactly what Ryan is saying, you know, to be, I would say if we were trying to answer how to build communities, right, not to be afraid to go there, right, to facing the limit together, and then being open to what God is working precisely through that limit. It's very life-giving.
Perfect. Oh yeah. Okay. Welcome to my TED Talk. So I'm Lindsay. I go to GW, and so we're on a college campus all the time, and we have a lot of community events, but intrinsically they're superficial and materialistic. We have our Tuesday night dinners and things like that. So how do we turn these events from something that's incredibly kind of like superficial to something that's towards our mission, that's facing towards the other, and how do we do this kind of in a sustainable way that builds a deeper community? What is your group? GW Catholics. Yes.
Could you say more about why they're intrinsically superficial?
Just because it's like centered around like food or like a community where we like gather because it's something, you know, that we do, and that's what brings people in the door. So it's kind of like, how do we turn that into something that is deeper, that shows them our mission?
I can start, yeah. So I have a theology and culture reading group at the law school that's mostly graduate students, and so I'm just, as you were talking, I was just remembering one little experience that we had where we have food. People come for the pizza, and it's a group that started to form a sense of kind of, I think, family. And I remember one moment where we sat down and we talked, about articles and things that people are interested in, short stuff because they have other reading to do. And one of the women who had been participating, she came and so I think she felt that there was some space to share a difficulty. And so she said, I'm really, really worried about this particular thing. And there was something about, as a group, just making room to hold that. And so for some reason, what came to my mind in that moment was, what would happen if each of us were to make a suitcase of what was worrying us in this moment and give it to somebody else to hold? And so then somebody else said, yeah, I'm worried about this. Can you hold that for me? Another person said, I'm worried about this. This is actually was something a little bit, more serious, like an illness. And so we had just this moment of, I'd say, like reciprocal vulnerability, where we were able to entrust to each other just something simple. And then this is what I learned from L'Arche, right? To say, okay, let's all try to be here completely in the present, paying attention to each other for this moment. It was something tiny, but it really just created this atmosphere of, yes, we're here to eat, but we're also here to pay attention to each other deeply in our needs. And I think that can open out a different kind of space in a group. But you guys are the experts in this.
Just say something quick. I fully agree. We believe that friendship is really the vehicle for evangelization, the best vehicle. So all the friendship moments that we have are built cumulatively in a relationship with a person so that in a time of crisis or a time of need or a time of joy or happiness, we can evangelize speaking from our own personal experience and speaking like through a relationship with the person in a way that's like credible and effective to them. So I'll sometimes tell like seminarians that come out with us to do some of the visits or the things that we do, like you are coming in like in a snapshot of my relationship with this person. Like I've known this person for 10 years and you're seeing me with him for a half hour, and it may be like a pretty mundane visit, you know, like we may go to McDonald's or we may go run an errand, but it sort of exists within this whole context, you know, and it's within that whole context that we have all these like different moments where we tell each other about what's going on with each other and how God is acting in our lives and our hopes and fears, like you said. And so I wouldn't, all this to say, I just would never discount the pizza party, you know? You know, I think pizza parties are great for evangelizing. But I also think that like, it's interesting because when we consider like, what is our mission? You know, our mission is to spread the gospel. And typically the mission of groups is to just attain the sanctity of their members, you know? And that's what religious orders do, and it feels really strange to be up here talking about community to a bunch of religious, by the way, in the audience, because you guys got it down, you know. But it's like, you know, religious orders have existed forever, like, you know, Dominicans or the Franciscans have existed for 800 years for the sanctity of their members, and all the many millions of people that they've brought to Jesus and to the church. It's been amazing, right? So, amen.
I apologize for making you the questioner or the questioner. You're so brave to ask a question. I don't see anybody else lined up. So, but yeah, I think my thing is just to challenge our assumptions of, is this actually whatever the negative things you said about it? Because you might not know who you're impacting or how you're impacting them, and you could also invite L'Arche. We would come. We go to Georgetown once a month for a prayer night, and over the past couple of years, the group has remained pretty small, but this year, 2 or 3 students from the Catholic students on campus have started coming, and they're definitely coming to help us, and they do for sure help because they bring brownies and stuff. I was wondering where Hazel was. Yeah, you love those brownies. Hey, Haze. But I think there's something pretty cool about L'Arche on a college campus that's really working really well.
Hi, everybody. Is this working? Yes. It is. So Ryan and Caitlin, do you have children?
Yes.
Could you tell us a little bit about your family? Just a teeny bit?
I have 4 children. The oldest is 7. 7, 4, 2, about to be 3, and just turned 1.
In the community?
Yes, yeah, we have a group of 3 houses on Alabama Avenue in Southeast DC, and I live there in one of the houses with my family, and then we have a house for male volunteers and female volunteers.
Great.
So.
That fills out the picture a little more.
Yes.
And Caitlin?
Similar. I have 3 sons. The oldest are 6.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And I think I understood, Ryan, that as you're working individually with people on their own personal level, that some of them are invited to join the community after a while. Is that correct? Like they develop or mature so that they would actually become evangelizers themselves? Does that happen?
No, not typically. We're not usually inviting the people that we help to join the Simple House community. Usually what we're trying to do is help them get sort of plugged into like a church near them.
Right.
So that they can sort of be a good part of that community.
Yes, yes.
Near them.
Okay, very good. I wanted to offer you a suggestion. I'm writing a booklet called How to Be a Companion of the Divine Visitor. speaking about our Lord and using him as a model from John 4, the Samaritan woman at the well. So you might want to read that over and see how our Lord goes from the natural conversation, very simple, the material, water, until he's got her hooked. So,
Thank you. I'd like
you're
to.
welcome. Oops.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? No, that brother.
So I had one. It's for all of you. Dr. Uhlman, you mentioned paying attention in community. Living in community myself, I know I fail at that sometimes, and I think as ministers, we miss what the people need, rather we ask what they want, and so that can get kind of mixed up. But what plays into paying attention within a community? What does that mean?
My friends who live with me are smiling. And I think the first thing that comes to my mind is that people have different gifts, right? And I think there's lots of people living in community here, and probably the first thing that you would say is, some people notice some things and they are blind to others. and then it seems like the other people have the reverse, right? And so I think the key to paying attention for me is first of all a basic openness to realize I am not going to be able to pay attention to everything because of my own limits. And so for me, the core is gratitude. When somebody helps me to pay attention or helps me with a specific dimension of my life, which may be more difficult. I'll be really concrete, right? When it comes to like putting my clothes together, like that they match, and cleaning the house well, and that's something that I'm not good at. And so to have somebody who's like, you know what, as I'm walking out the door, that does not match, right? so that, I think that's the first thing. And then I think also part of paying attention is just welcoming each other in our profound differences. And so the kind of transformation from this is getting on my nerves to, wow, how is this person growing and changing as we journey together? That, I think, there's two things that help me. One is when I put on my glasses in the morning to think, okay, this is the, and I always put them on because I'm super myopic, so I go nowhere without these glasses. And so this is the invitation to see the presence of Christ in each person, right? And then the windshield wipers are, when that becomes difficult, the kind of reciprocal mercy that we need to give each other a chance to start fresh. So those are just two little tiny things that, but they're not so tiny because I think that sense of then you feel that the presence of Christ is the one that helps us to pay attention and gives us the kind of battery pack to keep going in that. Does that help? Is it true to your own experience of living in community?
So, yeah.
Okay.
I might just say something from the other side of that like I think in our community, a thing that might keep somebody from paying attention would be like if you're dealing with sort of it could be an interior crisis or an issue or just something that you're worried about, and it sort of keeps you from like engaging with other people or seeing them or like paying attention to the person you're ministering to, because we're sort of like have our minds off, worried about this other thing. And so I think if we're not like dealing with that thing in prayer, even just acknowledging it and like, adequately just dealing with it or talking about it to somebody, that's the thing that just keeps us totally checked out and in little spin-off freak-out world, and not really engaged with what we're doing.
Fritz, can I describe how I think you pay attention? So I think sometimes we need to find and acknowledge that, life is never going to be in full balance. Like, we're probably not ever going to get to that point where we don't have a to-do list and can be fully present. And so what I think I've learned from FRITZ is that often being present requires you to sacrifice things, right? Not get that thing done, or not, whatever, you know what I'm saying. Which leads me to thinking that a thing that plays into how we be present is how we can actually acknowledge our own need for one another. So our charter in L'Arche has a little line that says, we recognize our need for one another. And I think that's how we build community. In the absence of structural poverty and racism, we might not have a simple house. In the absence of these things, we might not need political dialogue that builds unity. And so recognizing both in ourselves and in our communities that we have, I can't remember what you called it, Amy, but we call it mutual relationships. And so very much so on that like cold, crazy night, I needed Fritz to just pray because I probably wasn't gonna say anything that was fruitful. And I wanted to see Fritz. One of the things that you do really well is bless a lot of people. So I wanted to describe, Fritz attends an Episcopal church called St. Mary's in Arlington. And it's a pretty high liturgy Episcopal church. And oftentimes on Sundays, after receiving communion, Fritz stands right after the body has been distributed and blesses each person that goes by. Like, what I hear Fritz saying is, I have something to bless you with too. It's a beautiful way of being present when maybe it's not set up for you to do that, right? You might not be set up to go to McDonald's as a meaningful thing, but actually it is a meaningful thing.
How you doing? I had a question in regards to engaging non-believers. Obviously, in your various different groups, you encounter believers and non-believers. And in having those friendships, what suggestions do you have for when to bring Christ into the conversation and in what form? Do you usually start with how can I pray for you? Do you want to come to a service? Quote some scripture to their present situation? Or how do you usually bring Christ into the conversation?
Charlie, baby, look, a house, my mom, the dad, and we're going to be here, darling, watching, darling, by the way, it's gone. He died. My mom, the dad, Richard, died. Reggie, Oma, Jane, Joey, Harry, Jane, Bud, Linda, he died. Amen. Praise the Lord, our Father, and Son. Amen.
When we are out helping people in Southeast, we usually have some crosses on, and it's kind of obvious that we're church people. But we help all sorts of people. And we usually in a meeting will ask them at the end if they would just like to pray together, and like nothing very liturgical or anything, but just sort of a simple prayer, you know? And I always sort of think, I'm very happily about this, and we just ask them just what their needs are or what prayer intentions that they have, you know, and just offer a simple prayer like that. But a lot of times, like what I like to do in the course of like getting to know people is just ask them about what they think about the world. like what is their worldview? What do they think about why they're here? Do they think they have a purpose in life? Do they think there's any deeper meaning? Just sort of, especially with like non-believers or people who are sort of nominally Christian, just to begin to get at where they are. That's a way that I like to engage. Usually people have a lot of thoughts, so it can be quite easy to begin a conversation that way. And then you can get a feel for actually where they're at, for if they are probably, if you're going from this angle, you're not going to like go straight to apologetics, right? But but another helpful thing is like if they have any questions about the Catholic Church, usually people like have questions that they've just like always been burning to ask, and that's like a good thing. So.
Where's the person? Oh, sorry, right here. Okay. I think for me, it really, really depends on what is my relationship with the person. And so I feel like my best kind of training for this is my relationship with my brother. So my sister lives in community, I'm in community, and my brother is an agnostic. And so I think what I have learned from that relationship, I have zero authority over him. He wouldn't listen to me for a number of things. And so I think the work of saying, what does it mean to be sister to him in a way that I can open my heart and he can open his heart for what really matters to him. So that's that's one thing, is it really depends on the relationship. And then in my work relationships, I think that the kind of basic setup is also I guess it goes back to the pizza, right? To set up these spaces where there's a kind of openness where I'm not shy about who I am and people know my life and my commitments, but that they also experience in me a kind of open-hearted, open-handed space where they can share who they are. And I think my kind of core advice would be to follow the lead of the relationship. And so what seems to be folding in the ongoing exchange, because I think when there is that genuine openness on both sides in a relationship, people get curious and they want to know what matters to you deeply. And so then it's more like a sharing rather than I don't think there's any formula or any way in which the timing needs to be like this or start with this. Sometimes I've shared, a piece of scripture that's meaningful to me, but in response to maybe a question or a story that they have shared, but always in response to what's going on in the relationship. That would be sort of the core.
I'd just like to add two more things. The one would be, I think, when you're in a conversation like this with a person, take their ideas seriously. Never be dismissive, even if it's like, oh, I could refute that in a second or something like this, right? Because these are sort of like deeply held. Usually, if you're talking about a person's worldview, it's like a deeply held belief, and you sort of want to tread carefully, like you're in a holy place, And I think the other thing is like you want to abandon any notion of like that you might have, and we all have this, where it's like, I'm on project evangelize, or I'm like trying to get this person to a particular place or get them to see this thing. You sort of want to like get rid of that idea because it's not helpful, So.
Just another tiny thing. I think often what's powerful for people are stories, right, of how I personally have been transformed, maybe by trying to live the word, by trying to love some aspect of my faith, and so that what they experience is the example or the story, and there's something often very concrete about that can be, I think, more sometimes very powerful in a way that maybe an explanation might not reach them. So that's just another thought.
Okay, do we have any more questions?
First, I just wanted to thank you for giving your own personal stories. I came here with more I'm leaving here with more answers than I had questions coming here, so that was really helpful. Yeah. My name is Nathan. I'm part of a young adult Catholic group down in Southern Maryland called Pax Catholic, and our responsibility is to put on fun events and do things for the career and college-age Catholics in the area. So a lot of the things you guys touched on, I connected with, like burnt out, sense of unity, just discerning what the Holy Spirit wants. A lot of times I go to Holy Hour, and usually, I seek guidance from the Holy Spirit, but it's more about like finding out who I am and what I need to do with my personal vocation, and I haven't really thought about tying that in with my group or what its mission should be. So I'll be taking that away. Going out to the burnout thing, how do I distinguish between being burnt out and bearing a cross? I'm responsible for my team, and there have been moments where I'm like, am I pushing them too hard? Is everyone burnt out? Or is it, just the reality that we live in a culture and we're fighting a tide? How do we make that distinguishment? And then a follow-up question, if they are truly burnt out, like if the team is just burnt out, you mentioned reinvigorating them. Like as a leader, how do I reinvigorate my team to make them more effective?
So, a couple things. One is, I think here, honest friendships are really, really important. So I know I'm someone whose eyes are bigger than my stomach, right? And so I'm always putting 20 projects on my plate that are impossible. And so, but I can't always see that, right? I can't always see that that is a path that will lead me to becoming exhausted. And so I find the most useful thing is to have the kinds of friends who tell you the truth, who are like, you know what, if you travel along this path, so, make your list and then take a third or take a quarter of what. So what do you do with the rest of the time? Also to really seek that sense of balance, that it's not just stuff to do, but it's also caring for your health, time to pray, time to exercise, time to play. And I think one thing is recovering the sense of how important it is to find time to play and play with friends, right? So that's one thing. And then I think the core conviction that the battery pack that saves us from burnout is not being organized, it's not excellent leadership, it's not, there's no kind of silver bullet in all of that, but the battery pack is really nourishing that deep relationship with Jesus. And so that what saves me from burnout, but also what becomes a guide of what is possible in my life in terms of how to respond and how to be a channel of God's grace and God's love, comes ultimately from that sense of rootedness in time for prayer. I try to go to daily Mass, and I feel like the contact with the Eucharist each day is like also that just deep battery pack. So thinking about also nourishing a group that's trying to do a faith journey together, to think together, what does it mean to sort of nourish that deep respect for the way in which the energy comes from that relationship with Jesus that then is shared in the group as well. But those are the first two things that kind of come to my mind.
I want to say a controversial thing about this, so bear with me. I think burnout is a boogeyman. Okay, I think it doesn't really exist. And I think that the real problem with burnout is actually the question, am I burnt out? Because you're like searching your interior state to find am I just unhappy enough that I can quit the thing, or am I or some other question, And I think that typically this is like a sort of a problem of like looking too much inside. In the same way that like when you are discerning something, you can be so focused on yourself that you'll never solve it just by like running the problem over and over and over in your mind. You need to sort of like break out, you know, you need to like do a reboot, you know, you need to do like a fundamental direction change. Or you need to like, you know, I don't know, just go run up a mountain and scream, you know, or something, but, you know, change something. You need to break something. You need to like get out of the rut, you know. And we always need to get out of ruts, you know, and we always need to like reorient ourselves. And there are more significant times in our lives that we have to do that than others. But I don't like the sort of burnout paradigm because it's kind of like, okay, I'll do this, I'll do it as hard as I can, like in as much as I can for like years and years in kind of an unhealthy way, and then I'll just burn out and then I'll switch or something, you know? And I just don't like that because there's lots of like people in history and currently who like don't really get the burnout option, right? It's like you can't like burn out as a mom, you know? It's like you just still have your kids, you know, you just got it, you're there. You don't like, you can't really say like, I'm burned out, so see you everybody. You know, like you just gotta like dig back in and like talk to your spouse and just like figure out some other way to do it so that you can keep being faithful to you know, to the others in your life and to God, right? I once, early in the ministry, I was living by myself on Minnesota Avenue in Southeast, and my house got broken into, and it was pretty scary. And like every night I'd go home after that, I like plywooded up the windows, and every night I'd go home after that. I was so freaked out, you know. And it took months to get over it. And I got in this weird place where I was just like, everybody on the street I was like looking at, I was like, did they do it? Do they like me? You know, are they gonna do it again? You know, I was just like so suspicious and just such a weird mindset, right? So, but the volunteers from Kansas City, like they drove out like 22 hours to come and help me like, you know, tear down the back porch, put in a new window, put in new stairs, like rebuild the whole back of the house. And it was like a big party for a week. You know, we were doing all that stuff. And I was talking with Clark and sharing some of my concerns, and he was kind of like, you don't realize we just did this for you. You know, you came, you know, just be happy, you know, about it. And it was like, for me, it was like there was like a switch. I could just say like, I could just decide to be satisfied, you know, like, you know, like by saying like, this is my life and it's okay. And I've got all these good things going on and this is just really great. And there's hard things, sure, but everybody has hard things, and people live for centuries without electricity, so I can surely make it, you know, or something, right? And it just like that and it was a very simple thing, but it sort of reoriented my mind. So I think it's important to reorient, and it's important to like find the thing that satisfies you. And it's also like, if you want to stop doing something, you can just stop doing it, you know? Like, God calls us to a great many things. There's a great many things in the world to do. There's a great many ways to do His will. And we can pick and choose from a lot of them. And we can go do them and pursue them in peace and happiness because we want to please Him. And so I don't think it's usually that helpful to get hung up on like, should we be doing this, that type of stuff. I think that can be kind of a trap, so.
Time, but I'm sorry. My name is Esteban, seminarian at the Mount. I saw you have a Mount jacket on. That's awesome. Nice. So God willing, as a parish priest one day in a mission diocese of Savannah, Georgia. You guys have pretty much answered this in a lot of ways, but any other closing remarks for seminarians or other parish priests of how to build communities in parishes where a lot of times it's like, all right, go to Mass is over, see you later, see you next Sunday for 1 hour. Nobody, or I don't want to say nobody, but many people don't want to get involved, they think they don't have time, et cetera, but anyways, any advice for that, for a parish setting? Thank you.
I have one suggestion that I just think every pastor in the country needs to be doing. It's just going door to door in the neighborhood and knocking and inviting people to church. If you get 4 or 5 people in the parish that can do that, and like they're going to be kind of like this little army team that's going to have this experience, and they're going to be like sort of forged and bonded through that experience, that which is terrible, of talking to strangers, you know, and and so that'll be good. But I also like it just because I always just think the best community building is sort of like focused on going out. So.
My advice is to find your very own personal Hazel. So Hazel over here in the Redskins hat sits at the front pretty much every Sunday going to church. Is that correct? Pretty much every Saturday you say you're not going, but every Sunday you go. And, you know, find that person and ask, how can I help you get here? What do you need to be here? What do you know, all of those kind of things, because I think community is built around people who know who they are and are not afraid to share that. And, you know, the transformation that can happen often is in surprising ways for the people around those community builders.
I think my kind of core crystallized advice, I realized also working with young people that at a certain point when they would come over for dinner, that the most important thing to share was a limit or a failure. And so this space to just be human together, where nobody has to be a hero. We know that the only hero among us is Jesus. And I think with that openness in my own heart, realizing all of the potential that gets unleashed in a community, because we feel just loved, first of all, unconditionally by God, and then loved by each other in our limits. And so actually my hope for a parish priest would be to feel that you can create those kinds of sincere, just honest relationships with the people in the parish that also let them in, so that we can really just walk together in our humanity and our limits. And I think that opens up a lot of energy for a community.
Please give a warm thanks to our amazing panelists.